The desert sun in Phoenix has no mercy. By mid-afternoon, the temperature hovered just above 105 degrees Fahrenheit. The air shimmered above the blacktop of the Desert Springs Mall parking lot. Every parked vehicle looked like it was melting into the asphalt. Anyone stepping outside could feel the sting of heat instantly, burning through shoes, searing bare skin. Even touching a metal door handle for a second could leave a person recoiling in pain. Inside one of those parked cars, a little girl sat strapped in her car seat. Her name was Sophie. She was 2 years old, with curly dark hair matted to her forehead with sweat. Her round cheeks, usually full of life and color, were now flushed a deep red. The car was sealed tight. No air conditioning. No cracked windows. No way out. At first, Sophie had cried loudly, her small fists pounding the window as if anyone might notice. But as the minutes ticked by, her energy drained. Her cries became whimpers, then faint moans. Outside, dozens of people walked past. Some pushed strollers, others carried shopping bags, and still others hurried from one air-conditioned store to the next, too focused on their own lives to hear the muffled sounds of distress coming from behind the SUV's tinted glass. For Sophie, each passing second was a battle against heat that her tiny body was never meant to endure. It was a young couple that noticed first. They were walking back to their car, arms full of shopping bags, when the woman paused. "Did you hear that?" she asked, tilting her head. Her boyfriend shrugged, distracted by the sound of his car's key fob unlocking their vehicle. But then a faint, pitiful cry cut through the parking lot noise. The woman turned and froze. There, in the back seat of a silver SUV a few rows away, a little girl's face pressed against the glass. Her tiny hands smeared the window as she tried to get someone's attention. Her mouth opened in a silent wail. "Oh my God!" the woman gasped, dropping one of her shopping bags. The couple rushed over, peering inside. The girl's cheeks were beet red. Sweat rolled down her temples, dampening her shirt. She looked dazed, disoriented. The woman banged on the window. "Sweetheart, can you hear me?" The child let out a faint whimper, but her eyelids fluttered heavily. The boyfriend pulled on the door handle, but it was locked. He tried the other side. "Locked too. Call 911, the woman shouted. But neither of them had reception in that corner of the lot. Panic surged as they realized they had to get help. Fast. Without wasting another second, they sprinted toward the mall entrance. Her name was Rachel Monroe. At 27, Rachel was a single mother of one, balancing life between 2 part-time jobs and endless responsibilities. Those who knew her described her as someone constantly tired, bags under her eyes, always juggling schedules, always running behind. Neighbors sometimes saw her hurrying out the door in the mornings, Sophie trailing behind her with a bottle in hand. She looked overwhelmed, one recalled later, like she was just trying to survive each day. Friends said Rachel loved her daughter, but she struggled with patience. Sophie, only 2, was curious, stubborn, and prone to tantrums, traits that tested Rachel's thin reserve of energy. On that blistering July afternoon, Rachel had planned a quick errand. There was a store inside Desert Springs Mall holding an item she'd reserved earlier in the week. It was supposed to take no more than 10 minutes to grab it and go. But Sophie had been fussy in the car, crying, kicking her legs, tossing her toy aside. Rachel, exasperated and pressed for time, made a decision. She turned to Sophie in the back seat. "Mommy will be right back. Just a few minutes, okay?" She locked the car, slung her purse over her shoulder, and walked toward the mall entrance. Inside, the cool rush of air conditioning felt like heaven. But outside, the SUV began to turn into an oven. For Sophie, those few minutes would stretch into an eternity. Inside the cool, air-conditioned halls of Desert Springs Mall, Rachel Monroe felt instant relief. The heat outside had been suffocating, but here, surrounded by bright lights, polished floors, and the chatter of shoppers, she could finally breathe. She clutched her purse tighter and quickened her pace toward the boutique where she had placed a hold on a gift earlier that week. A birthday present for her niece. Just a small toy. Nothing that should take more than a few minutes to pick up. Her mind buzzed with rationalizations. Sophie would be fine. The car was locked. She was strapped into her seat, safe. She'd only be gone for the briefest moment. But moments don't mean the same thing in the desert sun. By the 10-minute mark, The car's interior had already climbed well over 110 degrees. By 15 minutes, it was closer to 120, and Sophie, too young to understand why her mother wasn't coming back, had exhausted herself crying. Her shirt clung to her skin. Her breathing grew shallow, rapid, and uneven. Meanwhile, Rachel stood at the counter, tapping her card, thanking the cashier. She didn't notice how much time had already passed. She didn't see the image of her daughter's tiny palms slapping weakly against hot glass. She believed she had control, that she'd be back before anything could go wrong. It was a belief that nearly cost her child's life. Back in the parking lot, the young couple who had spotted Sophie had already raced into the mall. Their panic was contagious. "There's a baby locked in a car," the woman cried at the security desk, her voice breaking. "She's in trouble." The guard's eyes widened. He reached for his radio immediately. "Dispatch, this is security. We have a report of a child locked inside a vehicle in the west lot. Requesting immediate response. Possible heat emergency." Within minutes, mall security staff sprinted outside with the couple, trying to pinpoint the exact car. The silver SUV stood out instantly, its windows fogged slightly from condensation, the heat so oppressive inside that moisture was beginning to cling to the glass. Through the window, Sophie was slumped sideways in her seat. Her lips moved faintly, whispering sounds too soft to hear. "Dear God," one of the guards muttered. He rattled the handle. "Lock tight," the couple begged. "Do something." "Police are on their way," the guard said, fumbling for his radio again. "We need EMS. Now." Several bystanders gathered, confusion turning to horror as they realized what was happening. Some pressed their hands against the windows, calling out encouragement to Sophie. Others shaded their eyes and turned away, unable to look at the suffering child. In the crowd, someone whispered what everyone else was thinking. "Where is her mother?" The wail of sirens split through the oppressive stillness of the lot. 2 Phoenix police cruisers swung into view, lights flashing. Officers jumped out before their cars had even stopped rolling. "Where is she?" one shouted. The mall guard pointed at the SUV. "Back seat, 2-year-old female, unresponsive, locked in." The officers rushed forward, pressing their faces to the glass. What they saw made their stomachs drop. Sophie's tiny body was limp, her head lolling to the side. Her chest heaved in rapid, shallow breaths. 30 minutes, the guard explained breathlessly. "She's been in there at least that long." The officer's jaw clenched. 30 minutes? In this heat? He shook his head, fury boiling beneath his professional calm. Without hesitation, one officer drew his baton. "Step back," he ordered the crowd. With a swift, brutal swing, he struck the driver's side window. The glass exploded into shards, scattering across the asphalt. The second officer reached in through the broken glass, fumbling with the seatbelt buckle. Sophie's body felt hot, unnaturally hot, to the touch. Her skin was flushed, her hair drenched in sweat. "I've got her," the officer shouted, pulling the toddler free. The crowd gasped collectively. Some covered their mouths in horror, others clutched each other as they watched paramedics rush forward. Sophie whimpered weakly, her voice barely audible. It was a sound of life but also of pain. "Get her cooled down now," the medic barked, already pressing a cold pack against Sophie's forehead, checking her pulse, whispering soothing words. The officers exchanged grim looks. Relief that the child was alive. Anger that it had ever come to this. And a burning question. Where was her mother? The air was heavy with silence after the shattering of glass. All eyes were fixed on Sophie, her tiny, overheated body limp in the officer's arms. The paramedics wasted no time. One spread a reflective emergency blanket across the asphalt and gently laid her down. Another placed a small oxygen mask over her face. A third poured bottled water over a towel and dabbed her forehead and arms, trying to bring her body temperature down. "She's hot to the touch," one medic said grimly, glancing at the officers. "Pulse is rapid, shallow breathing. She's close to heat stroke." The officer who had broken the window stood nearby, fists clenched at his sides. Anger etched across his face. He had seen plenty of tragedies in his years on the force, but the sight of a child so close to death, because of neglect, never failed to twist his gut. The crowd around them buzzed with whispers. How could anyone leave her like that? She's just a baby. What kind of mother does this? Meanwhile, Sophie stirred weakly, letting out a faint whimper. The sound was heartbreaking but also hopeful. She was alive. She was fighting. The lead medic looked up at the officers. We're transporting her. She needs a hospital, immediately. The officers nodded. They already knew. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a crime scene. The screech of shopping cart wheels cut through the tension. Heads turned as a woman emerged from the mall entrance, holding a small shopping bag and glancing curiously at the cluster of emergency vehicles. Rachel Monroe. She slowed when she saw the broken glass, the flashing red and blue lights, the paramedics crouched on the ground. And then her gaze landed on Sophie. For a fraction of a second, her face drained of color. But almost immediately, she regained composure, walking forward with a deliberate calm. What's going on? She asked, her voice oddly level. Is she okay? The officer nearest to her turned. Disbelief etched across his face. Are you the mother? Yes, Rachel said, nodding quickly. That's my daughter. Is she all right? The officer's voice rose, incredulous. Ma'am, your daughter was locked in that car for over 30 minutes, in this heat. Do you have any idea what could have happened? Rachel frowned, hugging the shopping bag to her chest like a shield. I was only gone a few minutes. I didn't think. You didn't think? The officer snapped, his patience already worn thin. Your child nearly died in that car. 30 minutes in 100-degree weather. She could have been gone by the time we got here. Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked not devastated, not panicked, but defensive. She's fine though, she muttered, almost as if reassuring herself. She looks fine. The crowd erupted with murmurs of outrage. To them, her tone wasn't relief, it was detachment. The officers exchanged a look. Something about her reaction was deeply unsettling. When questioned, Rachel's explanation tumbled out in fragments. She claimed her phone was inside the store. She didn't want to leave Sophie alone in the car for long, but she thought she could coax her into unlocking the door if needed. She didn't want to cause a scene by asking strangers for help. She was laughing at first, Rachel insisted. She was fine. I thought I could be quick. The officer shook his head slowly, his jaw tight. Laughing? Do you understand that the inside of that vehicle was over 120 degrees? A 2-year-old can't survive that for long. Rachel's shoulders slumped, but her face remained strangely passive. I didn't want to bother anyone, she muttered. Bother anyone? The officer's voice rose again, incredulous. Your daughter's life was at stake and you didn't want to bother anyone? The paramedics, overhearing, exchanged glances of disbelief as they prepared Sophie for transport. The crowd's whispers sharpened into condemnation. She doesn't even care. She's making excuses. That baby deserves better. And in that moment, it was clear. Rachel Monroe was not just a struggling mother who had made a mistake. In the eyes of the officers, the medics, and the witnesses around her, she had crossed the line into neglect. And the law would treat it as such. The paramedics lifted Sophie onto a stretcher, covering her with a cool damp sheet to help regulate her body temperature. A small oxygen mask fit snugly over her face as they wheeled her toward the ambulance. Rachel tried to follow, but an officer stepped in her path. Ma'am, stop right there. She blinked, confused. But that's my daughter. Yes, and she's being taken care of, the officer interrupted firmly. Right now we need to talk about you. Rachel's grip tightened on the shopping bag in her hand. What do you mean? Another officer approached, speaking low but firm. You left a child locked in a hot car. 30 minutes. Temperatures over 100 degrees. That's child endangerment. Rachel shook her head quickly, as if trying to erase the words. No, I didn't mean to. I was just. The officer cut her off. Ma'am, turn around for me. Her face went pale. Wait, what? You're under arrest. The sound of handcuffs snapping shut echoed across the lot. The crowd, still gathered around, murmured in approval. Some even clapped quietly, as though justice was unfolding before their eyes. Rachel didn't resist. She lowered her eyes to the ground as the officers led her toward the patrol car. The shopping bag slipped from her hand, falling forgotten onto the asphalt. Inside the ambulance, Sophie let out a soft whimper as the doors closed. For her, the nightmare was ending. For her mother, it was just beginning. At St. Joseph's Hospital, doctors worked quickly to stabilize Sophie. They monitored her vitals, gave her fluids, and cooled her body with ice packs and fans. A pediatrician later explained to reporters, "At her age, children cannot regulate their body temperature like adults. In this kind of heat, a child can suffer organ damage or worse in a matter of minutes." This little girl was very lucky. Meanwhile, police processed Rachel at the county jail. Her mugshot captured a blank expression, her eyes dull, her mouth set in a thin line. To many it looked like indifference. In truth, no one could say what she was really feeling. Regret? Shame? Or only frustration at being caught? When detectives interviewed her, Rachel repeated the same lines. "I left my phone inside. I didn't want to bother anyone. She was fine when I left her." But her words only made the officers' disbelief grow. One wrote in his report, "The mother appeared nonchalant, even defensive. Her explanation did not match the severity of the situation." At the hospital, Child Protective Services stepped in. Calls were made to Sophie's father, who arrived later that evening to sit at her bedside. He held her small hand in his, tears slipping down his cheeks as he whispered, "Daddy's here now." For Sophie, the nightmare had ended with survival. For Rachel, it ended with a jail cell and the looming weight of charges that could alter her life forever. News of the incident spread across Phoenix within hours. Local TV stations aired footage of the mall parking lot, the shattered glass still scattered on the ground. Witnesses gave interviews, their voices filled with disbelief and anger. "She didn't even look upset," one bystander told a reporter. "The baby was sweating, crying, and she just said she's fine." Who says that? On social media, the outrage was instant. "I don't care how stressed you are, no excuse for leaving a baby in a car. That poor little girl. She deserved better. Lock her up. She shouldn't get another chance to do this." Parents across the city looked at their own children differently that night, hugging them tighter, imagining what it must have been like for Sophie in that stifling SUV. The Phoenix Police Department released a statement reminding the public, "Even on days under 100 degrees, the inside of a car can reach fatal temperatures in less than 15 minutes. Never leave a child unattended in a vehicle, not even for a moment." The words were a warning, but they also carried a sobering truth. Rachel Monroe had gambled with her daughter's life. And though Sophie survived, the community would never forget the image of that small child pulled from the sweltering car, clinging weakly to life. Weeks later, Rachel Monroe stood in a Phoenix courtroom, her hands clasped in front of her as the judge read the charges. Child endangerment. Criminal neglect. She pled not guilty. Her public defender argued that she hadn't intended to harm her daughter, that it was a tragic accident, a lapse in judgment made worse by stress, exhaustion, and poor decision-making. But prosecutors painted a different picture. A mother who walked past dozens of strangers, who refused to ask for help, who valued convenience over her daughter's safety. They replayed security footage showing Rachel entering and exiting the mall multiple times, while Sophie remained locked in the sweltering SUV. Witnesses testified that she looked calm, almost detached. The jury listened closely. Some shook their heads as the evidence unfolded. Rachel sat silently, her face unreadable. Outside the courthouse, the community's outrage had not softened. Protesters held signs reading, "No excuse for neglect. Protect our children." Local parents filled news segments, voicing their anger. "I don't care how tired you are," one mother said. "You don't leave your baby in a hot car. Period." Even strangers who had never met Rachel felt compelled to speak out. To them, Sophie wasn't just one child. She was a symbol of every time an innocent life had been endangered by carelessness. Rachel's name spread across social media. She wasn't just Rachel Monroe anymore. She was the Phoenix mother who left her toddler in the heat. Her reputation was branded by her mistake. But not everyone agreed. Some of Rachel's friends came forward, defending her character. "She's not a monster," one insisted. "She loves Sophie. She was overwhelmed. She made a terrible mistake." Others argued that jail wasn't the answer, that Rachel needed counseling, support, and parenting classes, not prison bars. The debate grew heated. Was Rachel Monroe a criminal deserving punishment, or a struggling mother who had failed under pressure? The courtroom became a battleground of opinions, with Sophie's future hanging in the balance. Through it all, Sophie remained the silent center of the storm. After being released from the hospital, she was placed in the temporary care of her father. He arrived at court hearings, carrying her small backpack and holding her hand tightly as reporters snapped photos. He spoke little, but once told a journalist, "All I care about is that she's safe." In Sophie's innocence, she didn't understand the chaos surrounding her. She only knew that her world had changed, that mommy wasn't coming home, at least for now. For Rachel, that truth cut deeper than any charge. Months dragged on. Rachel's trial was postponed, rescheduled, delayed again. Each time, the community waited to hear what her punishment would be. In the meantime, she remained free on bail, though under strict supervision. She wasn't allowed unsupervised visits with Sophie. Her world had shrunk to court appearances, probation meetings, and the echo of public judgment that followed her everywhere. Some nights, in her small apartment, she replayed the events in her head. The decision to leave Sophie in the car, the sight of flashing lights when she returned, the officer's furious voice as handcuffs closed around her wrists. For the first time, she admitted to herself, "I could have lost her." And perhaps that truth haunted her more than any prison cell ever could. The case of Rachel Monroe left Phoenix shaken. It became a cautionary tale, retold in parenting groups, in schools, on local news segments warning against leaving children unattended in vehicles. Experts reminded the public, on a 100-degree day, the inside of a car can reach 120 degrees in minutes. A child's body overheats 3 to 5 times faster than an adult's. In less than half an hour, irreversible damage, or death, can occur. Rachel's story wasn't unique. Across the United States, dozens of children die each year in hot cars, sometimes by accident, sometimes by neglect. But Sophie survived. She lived because strangers noticed, because officers acted fast, because paramedics refused to give up. And while Rachel Monroe's future remains uncertain, her trial still pending, her reputation forever marked. The lesson is painfully clear. There is no such thing as just a few minutes when it comes to a child's life.